Hi there, welcome to What and Series 16, and we're up to number 28. We're really rolling it through, and we're still looking at chapter 42 of Genesis. In verse 35 is where the brothers discover that each man's money has been returned. Okay, it says, then it happened as they emptied their sacks that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Yeah. Okay, they come to the realization that the money had been put back in their sack by Joseph. Surprisingly, each man's bundle was in his sack. They had no idea that this would happen. If anything, this surprised them more than when they found the bundle of money in the one sack. There was more than they ever thought. Well, Jesus has given his people more than we think of. And sometimes we discover it piece by piece over a period of time. This is motivation for us as believers to keep going, to keep growing in our faith with Jesus and keep growing in our life with Jesus. So we actually get to know more of the gifts and more of the stuff that he's offered us. It says each man's bundle of money was in his sack. Joseph gave them the bread of life. Literally, he gave them food to live by. And he absolutely refused any payment. Their money wasn't what he wanted. The true bread of life can't be purchased. Now we know that. Jesus refused any payment for anything much as he did. Believers give out of gratitude because they've received. We don't give because we can buy from Jesus. That's not the way that it works. But notice in the story, they were afraid. What were they afraid of? Well, firstly, they were afraid of receiving what they didn't earn, because sometimes grace tests us. They were afraid of their own conscience. Yes, most definitely. But more than anything, they were afraid of Joseph, because he is this great man that they couldn't figure out. And in a sense, they had to fear Joseph before they could be reconciled with him. Yeah. It goes on, and Jacob gets a reaction. And we hear that in verse 36. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me. Okay. You have bereaved me is a statement of saying, hey, you're grieving me. You're making this really difficult for me. Joseph spoke more truth than he knew. He said that his sons had bereaved him and that it was their fault that Joseph and Simeon were gone. He instinctively knows the truth here, even though he can't prove it. It's probably very subconscious. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. This tortures Jacob. Yet these statements were not true. Not only was Joseph alive, but Jacob would see him soon and Joseph would rescue their whole family. We don't blame Jacob for believing that Joseph was dead. He'd been told a very, very cunning lie. Yet this shows the power of a lie believed. When we believe lies, whether it is our fault or not, the lie has power over us. This is why we should learn and love and cherish God's truth. Okay? It says there, God has forsaken me. If I believe that lie, it would impact the way that I live. I'm beyond hope. If I believed that lie, then my life would have no sense of purpose. I can never confess my sin. If we believe that, we don't believe that God can deal with it. I'm worthless. If I believe that, my life has no purpose. You see where this is all going? And here it says, that Jacob says, and you want to take Benjamin from me as well. And here we have this fear that he would lose even more. Since he lost Joseph, Jacob lived to protect himself from further devastating loss. All these things are against me is the terminology that's recorded there. This summarized Jacob's outlook on life. Everything was going wrong. He had no happiness in the present and no hope in the future. He woke up, went to bed thinking all these things are pretty pointless and are all against me. Jacob was God's chosen and still said all these things were against me. Jacob was healthy and still said all these things are against me. Jacob was a wealthy man and still said all these things are against me. Interesting perspectives, aren't they? At the very moment Jacob felt these things were against him, God's plan was working. There was a plan in all this, even though Jacob couldn't see it or feel it. Yeah. That's one of those things that we need to reconcile with the fact that if we don't feel like things are going right, God is still in control. And let's be aware of that. God is still in control. And in this situation, with Joseph and Jacob and all the brothers, God is still in control. The plan was not only good for Jacob and his family, but it would impact all of history. God was working all things together for good. Yes, Romans 8:28. If Joseph's family wasn't messed up and weird like it was, his brothers would never have sold him as a slave. If Joseph's brothers never sold him as a slave, then Joseph would never have gone to Egypt. And I think of the consequences. If Joseph never went to Egypt, he never would have been sold to Potiphar. If Joseph was never sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would never have falsely accused him of rape. You get all these things? If Potiphar's wife never falsely accused him, then Joseph would never have been put into prison. All of these things go together. If Joseph was never put in prison, he would never have met the baker and the butler of Pharaoh. All of these things are very logical when you put them all together. If Joseph had never met the baker and the butler, he would, guess what? Never have interpreted their dreams. And in turn, if Joseph had never interpreted their dreams, he would never have had the opportunity to interpret Pharaoh's dream. If Joseph never interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, he never would have become prime minister, or however you want to say that, second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. We go one further. If Joseph never became prime minister, he never would have wisely prepared for terrible famine. Okay. Now it's all coming together to the situation we find ourselves now. If Joseph never wisely prepared for the terrible famine, then his family back in Canaan would have died in that famine. But that's not the way God worked. If Joseph's family back in Canaan died of famine, then the Messiah could not have come from a dead family. Jesus would not have been born. Let's get that. This all fits together right through history. If the Messiah did not come, then our faith is in vain. If Jesus never came, then we're all dead in our sins and without any hope. You see, all of these things work together for the good of those who love him. In all of this, there is a sobering contrast between Jacob and Joseph. Joseph had had far worse circumstances and consequences, but he never took the attitude that everything is against me. That's interesting, isn't it? We need to take that attitude with us as we go into our week. Bless you.